So good morning and welcome to our latest debate with the buyer. Today we're heading off to Portugal. Well, sadly not in reality, only by Zoom. But Portugal has been known as a long history of travel, discovery and exploration and opening up parts of the world. And today is all about flipping that on its head and allowing some UK buyers and leading figures in the UK trade the chance to delve into Portugal as a whole, but in particular to look at the region of Setúbal, if that's how you pronounce it, which
we'll come to that.
We'll come to that in more detail, and hopefully other people can pronounce it better than I can. But today is really an opportunity to hear from some specialists in the trades who deal with Portugal all the time. Plus those who are tasked with actually selling direct to consumers in restaurants and in bars as well. And so the idea is to explore Portugal in the main, but to then focus in on the region of Setúbal. So to help me do that, I have some famous wine explorers in their own rights. So perhaps it's best if I introduce two of the country's sort of Portuguese wine specialists, wine importers. So Nick Oakley from Oakley Wine Agencies. Nice to have you, Nick. Good to have you on board.
Nice to be here.
Yeah,
thanks, Richard.
And Raymond Reynolds, who's the owner of Raymond Reynolds, who's also helped to bring lots of Portuguese wines to lots of UK consumers. So thanks to them. And then from the on-trade side, we have Max Graham, who's the founder of Bardoro, who's
great bar, by the way, Max.
Trying to do the same directly with Bardoro, and also was part of the team behind the FETSA successful wine consumer event earlier in the summer at the Tobacco Dock in London, which was a great to see Portugal being brought to so many consumers in a new way. We also have Emmanuel Pesquera, who's the head sommelier from the Gordon Ramsay Group. So we're very pleased to have you today, Emmanuel.
Thanks for having me.
Great to know where Portuguese wine sits within the fine dining scene.
Heavily.
We also have a very familiar face with Noel Reed from Rediscover Wines, his new wine importing agency. So it'd be good to see where Portugal sits within Noel's portfolio, and obviously from his own background, many years of buying for different people. And the one and only, and today he's representing the Setúbal jury. We have the one and only Joe Wansack, wine broadcaster and commentator and communicator. So welcome to you all. Thanks for taking part. Just thought to kick things off. Perhaps if, and I've sort of did a quick introduction to yourselves, but perhaps if Nick and Raymond, I can come to you first, and just for those who don't know you, and I mean they may know of your agencies, but just give us an indication of why Portugal has been such an important part of your business, really, and then we can obviously go into Setúbal separately, but just to sort of put it into context. Nick, do you want to go first?
Yes. So just to give some context, we've been specialized in Portuguese wines for 32 years. We started the business in 1990, and for the first 20 of those, we worked only with Portuguese wines. We do some wines from Spain. We cover maybe 30 or 40% of Spain, but Portugal is our central specialization. We don't import any stock. We are ex-sellers, outsourced export office for wineries in Portugal, and we represent about 12, 14 separate wineries. We tend to have 2 wineries in each region. We only actually have one in Setúbal, oddly. So that's the context. And in terms of Portugal, I mean, I fell into Portugal because my wife's parents retired to the Algarve, and I was already in the wine trade, and I discovered Portuguese wines, and suddenly I kind of, it wasn't a plan, but I fell into it. And I don't have a drop of Portuguese blood in me, but I just love the wines. I kind of fell in love with them. I'm still in love with them. Mm-hmm. And you know, for a long time it was like pushing mercury uphill. Thankfully it's not like that anymore. So the last 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer than that, it's been getting easier and easier and better and better. And our main business actually is national retail. I would say probably 80 to 90% of our wines go eventually to be sold on a shelf, mostly in national chains. And that's been booming happily, thank God, over the last 3 or 4 years. So that's where we sit. And do you want me to speak about Setúbal specifically?
We'll do that separately, actually. We'll go
okay, yeah, I'll wait for that and pass over to Raymond.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Exactly. And I mean, obviously, great credit to yourself for. I can't believe this. It's been so long that you've been, pushing Portugal. So, all credit to yourself for that. Now,
you certainly deserve success.
Can you beat 32 years, Raymond? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like Nick, we've been around for that long. The connection comes from family roots in Portugal and from experiences in the port trade where I worked before I set up RR Limited. And that sort of gave me the inspiration and the belief that there was something special there. Like Nick says, it's taken a while, but everything has to achieve a critical mass, and that critical mass of both enthusiasm from the market, sort of perception, good perceptions, and the wonderful work that Vigneron, the wine industry in Portugal has done to develop it, investment, know-how, knowledge, enthusiasm. It's just mushroomed. So we are 90% Portugal in our portfolio, dealing with around about 28 wineries. Not necessarily one from every region. It's about what we feel everyone contributes within that portfolio. From the Setúbal area, we have one. It's an area that I think we'll come back to that, as you say, Richard. But it's an area which has been possibly a little bit behind the curve in development of itself and its own identity. So where do we sell to? We sell mainly to wine merchants, independent wine merchants up and down the UK, and the on-trade too, as well as a few nationals.
Excellent. Okay. Well, yeah, and I suppose we'll also actually explore how you go around choosing the wines that you do want to work with as well. Actually, that's an interesting thing that we'll pick up on. Noel, I don't know, I mean, where you are with your range at the moment in terms of where Portugal sits, but I know obviously over the years you've bought lots of Portuguese wines. Where does Portugal sit for you within your own range, or
in terms of outside the circle at the moment? Hence the interest in this debate. Rediscover Wines is a year or so old. I've been in the trade, as some of you will know, for some time. And Rediscover Wines, I set up to well, the word itself. I mean, I'll give you an idea of the last couple of wineries. I have 8 wineries currently, looking for a couple more. And we looked at Malbec, but I looked at Catchy and Salter. We looked at Rioja, but I've looked at White Rioja, which I blend from Sauvignon and Garnacha. So looking at new expressions from regions and things people may currently understand, or new things completely, as in, say, red wine from Setúbal, which I'm completely unfamiliar with. So hence the interest here. So yeah, it doesn't.
We might have just the thing for you, Mr. Reed.
There we are. and for me, those that know me, being a northern boy, quality and value, that's the end of it, really. It doesn't go any further than that. So I'm really excited to hear what's on offer today and to taste through with you guys.
Yeah, and I guess quality and value is, well, quality, value, diversity and variety seem to be the key pillars around what Portugal, which people come back to.
Especially as we
I think people are starting to appreciate it, for whatever region you pick in Portugal, the individuality, the authenticity of the wines. So they really do stand out in blind tastings. If you're a master wine tasting exam, you're expected to pick the Portuguese ones out. They have real identity. They really taste Portuguese.
And Joe, just one thing there. I mean, the weird thing about us sitting here with, or even myself not having a wide idea of the area, when we consider how many wines are scored so highly at the IWC.
Yeah.
You don't see that representation.
Flight after flight after flight, and we're giving out silvers and golds every other flight. And I think the International Wine Challenge, and actually the contribution of winemakers from Portugal committing to coming and judging those competitions, has been a genuine key part to their increasing success. And when they first came 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we used to dread that and Alentejo, Alicante Boucher flight after lunch. It was like, oh, just punch me in the face. I don't want it. And then you had these winemakers going, well, what's wrong with this? I mean, I put it in a little bit of oak. So, well, how much oak? Well, new American oak for 24 months. And they slowly started to see that how their wines looked, both in context to other wines in the world, but also not just the UK market, but to other foreign judges. And the wines have definitely improved and gone in a direction because of their participation. And I think that they should be congratulated for embracing the competition system, because I think it's made the vast majority of Portugal better drinking. I think better balanced.
Joe, can you say with Nick and Raymond particularly flying the flag through the difficult times and into these years? It's great to see, you know, because at the end of the day, pushing great wine is the way forward, and I know both you boys have got plenty of it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Max, can I come to you? So you obviously put your flag very firmly. I mean, opening a bar is a risky thing to do, full stop. So, but you've obviously put your heart into Portugal as well. Do you want to give us an idea of
absolutely
why Bar Douro?
So yeah, I was actually working. So I grew up in Portugal. My family have been involved in the port trade for a long time. Our family business is now Churchill's Port. And back in 2012, I actually was working for Churchill's and launched a pop-up port bar in Soho on Greek Street, which was an 8-month pop-up. And that was sort of really where I caught that sort of love for restaurants. You know, but I was, you know, in Soho in the heart of the city, and I just couldn't understand why Portugal was so poorly represented. You know, you had the likes of Barafina, Morito doing amazing things for Spain, but you just really didn't have much for Portugal. You know, this was before Taverna de Mercado opened and Nuno Mendes, it was before Leandro opened Londrino. And that was really the start, the idea of Bar Douro. And, you know, I called it Bar Douro because that was the sort of natural connection. And then, you know, what really followed was a complete, you used the word discovery. And the last 6 years have been exactly that. It's been, you know, I came at it with a knowledge of the north, of Portugal, you know, even Bairrada and the Minho. Very little knowledge of the south, and you know what's been wonderful. You know, we've got, our list is extensive. It's 100% Portuguese, and you know we cover every single region. We really focus on the diversity that Portugal offers, and not only just showing, you know, not just showing the sort of classics. And I wouldn't even say classics. We really try and showcase the pioneers, you know, Luís Pato, you know, some of these guys that have really navigated the direction of where Portuguese wine is going. But then we really champion the cutting edge. And I think, you know, what I love about Portugal's wine scene right now is its dynamism. I feel like it is a melting pot of talent. You know, we've had these pioneers of the previous generation that are still, you know, they are now making superb wines. And what's happened is they've got this fan of winemakers below them that are now all just going off and doing their own incredible projects, taking over their old family vineyards, you know, and it's just incredibly exciting to see that happen. You know, I think of Casal de Aires, you know, in the Tejo, and I think of Joana Pinhão, who went back there and has just, you know, inherited this family vineyard, and it's just transforming an area at Tejo, which is so well known for volume, not really for terroir, or really individual specialist terroir. That's what she's doing. So I think what we're seeing is this move from this idea of Portugal, you know, and maybe more a kind of 80s view of Portugal being dominated by cooperatives, to Portugal, like Raymond said, and the winemakers that Raymond's been championing forever. You you know, it's vignerons and not all vignerons, but people who really care about terroir, really care about their native grape varieties, people who really care about Portuguese identity and regional identity and sub-regional identity.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Actually,
Max,
Amanda, can I ask you as well, from your experience from a sommelier side? I mean, what's perception of Portugal overall, and where you are in terms of your list and consumer reaction?
Absolutely. I mean, if one thing you're going to take from Portugal in general, it's quality versus price. And I believe the pandemic was a huge impact on the Portuguese culture. And for them to open up to the outside world more than they used to open. I believe what you had before the pandemic is only the big boys, I might call them, are the ones are on the wine list of everyone in UK, from Dirk to Valado to we're talking about Quinta do Crasto to all elements. However, the little small producers were never been heard of. They just start to shine and get out of their the cocoon and the egg and start to deliver something exceptional. And I believe when people were home, you could see now after the pandemic, people are much more educated regarding wine. They had time to read more about wine, and with the technology that you have at the moment with many apps and so on, Vivino, and you could easily Google and find out what you want to drink in a seconds. What is the quality of it? And many of the people start to follow that. Beside that, you have a lot of people here, like as sommeliers, they want something discovery. I run officially 6 wine pairings in a 22-seat restaurant and 100 wines by the glass, and I hero unknown grape. To give you an idea, I hero Arrinto Intanvage, I hero Aragonese, I hero Touriga Nacional, I hero things that people might never have access to. I hero Dao, I hero Douro, I hero every little bit, something I have discovered, and something is not bad for the pockets of the people, because in many ways people don't want to explore or get out of the safe zone because they have to pay for it and they have to spend the money for it. And here with 100 wines by the glass, I'm able, to explore and bring 2 bottles of this and 2 bottles of that and 2 bottles of that. And when it's finished, we move on to another region. And that's the beauty, is diversity, is not finding a wine which you think is absolutely outstanding and then sit on it for the whole year, where the sommeliers will get dull. The returning guests will feel like there is no love and care for the quality of the wine. However, I believe there's so many great wines in Portugal undiscovered as yet. And there are so many. I mean, I was there a few weeks ago and I have tasted some things beyond insanity. And many people didn't believe that even their wine can age 14, 15 years. Example, I tasted a white wine from one of the best producer for a Muscatel in Portugal from 2008. It was like a white Ron, which is unbelievable.
Incredible.
For the price of what? £10, 10 euro.
Great.
What you have here, you have a wine with a great quality. It shows how incredible the winemaking has become in Portugal. Shows how much use of technology is incredible. It shows how the identity of the grape is there. You don't need to overwork the grape, just allow the terroir and the grape itself to give you the quality. And above all, it's not expensive, and it makes you an incredible GP and contribution to your bottom line. So you tick all the boxes. And this is something that's why on my wine list here, and extending it further across the group, is for me is about discovering the niche. Of course, you have to have the classics. We all know that. You have to have what everybody loves: Sauvignon Blanc, Chablis, Riesling, and so on and so on and so on. And you have to have a little bit for everyone. And this is the main balance that we think is a word we can use. It's almost impossible. Is to how can I touch a heart of every guest, even with one wine. And that's the reason I have that diversity of so many glasses. People think I'm crazy. 100 wines by the glass for 22-seat restaurants, and 5 tables in the bar. And people think I'm more crazy when I'm serving, an 18-liter Melchor by Coravin. I have 46 glasses in 3 days from an 18-liter. I mean, tells you the people want to get out, want to explore, want to try something unusual, want to really have the story. It's all about the story. It's not only the quality of the wine, which is great.
So that's great. I think that's a really good scene, setting the scene really.
Yeah, 100%. That was really good.
It's about really, because I mean, where we want to look now in more detail, I suppose, is where Setúbal actually sits within that, and how undiscovered, or the chance to discover more of this particular region of Portugal, which perhaps isn't as well known or has had its moment in the sun as yet. So, Joe, do you want to? I mean, I don't know whether you're about to share this.
I think I might have cracked this. Give me one more chance. I think I might get this right.
I haven't downloaded it, but I don't know how you share it, to be honest.
But you know, I believe one thing as well, if I may add, people perception is Sauterne is only sweet wine. People perception Bordeaux is a red wine. People perception is Setúbal is a sweet wine. And this is where you correct them that it's not about being wrong or right. Just make them understand that there is everywhere on earth a great wine. It does not matter the perception of what they have.
Yeah, and some incredible old vines, which is, you know, they've been around for a long, long time. It's not just, you know, a new thing. These are ancient techniques.
Yeah, I think the perception thing is interesting, that now there don't seem to be any preconceptions about Portugal. There's this sort of willingness to let it come, to experience it, and to enjoy all that diversity that Emmanuel's just been talking about. There it is. It's fun.
I'm assuming nobody can see this. Nobody can see my presentation.
I can see it. No, I can see your. Can we all see it?
I can see it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see it on my mobile as well.
We're game on. We're game on. I'm fully aware. Richard, I know we were supposed to finish at 11:30. This is going to be quite a tall order. I'm going to do a quick presentation. We'll have a chat. Then we'll do a tasting of the reds and maybe have a conversation. Then I'll talk very quickly about Muscatel de Setúbal. Then we'll do the things. But, that's quite a lot to cover, I know, in an hour. So I don't want to look like I'm pushing. I'm being flippant, but I'm going to run through these things quickly so we can have a proper discussion. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, go for it,
right, Setúbal. It's pronounced Setúbal. The accents over the U. The E, when you see SET at the beginning of a Portuguese word, it means saint. So it always gets compressed. The E disappears. So and we would think it was Moscatel, but O's are often pronounced as U's. So it's not Moscatel de Setúbal, it's Muscatel de Setúbal. And that's the right way to pronounce it. I just thought it'd be fun that we all start on the same page. Okay, so
Joe, do that again, please.
It's Muscatel de Setúbal.
Muscatel de Setúbal.
Muscatel de Setúbal. So,
I think you need a few glasses of sweet wine with that.
Yeah, well, we're almost certainly going to have some in not too long distant future. I have some very nice ones here to show in my collection. But the story over the last 2 years is, since lockdown, Portugal has had a fantastic growth spurt, both in not just in volume, but in, as you can see, in value. Which I think is really the key point, because I think Portuguese wine has always been that inexpensive wine you buy from large high-profit mail-order companies like Laithwaite's, Wine Warehouse, Virgin Wines. But clearly people are buying more expensive Portuguese wine. Where that is because Portuguese wine's just got better and is more expensive, it's hard to fathom. But over a single year, they've nearly doubled sales in the UK, which is great. But to put it into context of Portugal as a country, about 20% of the entire production of red wine comes from this tiny part, from Setúbal. We talk about Ribatejo, Tejo, Alentejo, Algarve, these big areas. But Setúbal is a very, very intensively farmed wine region, which is, I think, loved a lot more by Portuguese locally than internationally. I think for two reasons. Raymond made the point earlier that I think they were just lagging behind in terms of the level of rusticity and winemaking culture. A bit, but also it's a 20-minute train ride from the middle of their capital city, so it fuels drinking in Lisbon. It's, you know, purely from a sociological and geographical perspective, it just gets chomped away by Portuguese people. It's the everyday drink there, and Muscatel de Setúbal is a drink that I think even if you go to the north of Portugal, isn't necessarily a household name, but it is one of the great fortifieds of the world. In this country, when we talk to bartenders, we talk about Madeira, sherry, and port, and I think this wine needs to be referenced in that conversation more often, because the wines, as I hope you'll see, are truly delicious. Okay, right, moving on. This is a map. Yes, here we go. So this is a map of the region and where it sits in Portugal. You look at the districts down the right-hand side. There's lots of sub-districts. I wish I could enlarge this, but I don't want to touch it and it disappear. We're basically looking at a mini version of the whole of Portugal. You've got the top bit and the bottom bit. Anything that's red and yellow is on the alluvial sand soils, which are at very low altitude. In fact, I think the highest vineyards are less than 100 feet above the Atlantic. Really, there are a few small hill ridges if you go right down into Santiago in the south, where there's a fantastic natural wine producer down there. There aren't many producers that far out of town, but the ones that are there are really achieving astonishing things. There's another vineyard called Briginu, which is right next to the sea. You can smell the kelp from the vineyard, and it's palpable that these wines have this wonderful salinity. They make a killer gin with seaweeds and stuff. But their red wines have this wonderfully maritime, slick, almost Coonawarra cool about them. But they always maintain this sense of being by the sea, both in smell and taste. If you take the top part, that's basically the beachhead of Setúbal. And if you look at the area which is in sort of like jade blue on the tip, and the one next to it, which is green, so the bottom line, that's actually a hill range. I want to say hill range. They're actually quite significant hills. They would be as tall as the tallest vineyards in Beaujolais, for example. So they're you can call them mountains, I think. And there's Arrábida, which is the tallest and biggest, followed by San Luis and then San Francisco. And there are three of these mountains, which create a very, very different climate in the top bit to the ones at the bottom, because not only is it hilly, but because of tectonic action, geographical action, the top half is steep hills, protected from the sea by a mountain, so they don't have the same maritime breezes coming in, the same moisture, there's not the same disease pressure, but also you've got very fine clay and limestone soils in that part of the region, where in the south it's largely alluvial sand. Okay, you can see this like long cigar-like lagoon spit there, which is the most extraordinary 42-mile long unbroken white beach. I don't know why people don't know more about this place. But if you go into Lisbon, in 25 minutes, you're in Setúbal. Setúbal, the city, which is actually inside the Bay Area, if you see it there, is a city of about 100,000 people. It's got a larger municipal spread, but you're almost in a conurbation going north into Lisbon already when you're in Setúbal. Famous for, frankly, the finest sardines on earth. But also some of the finest fish, and also for those people who take it seriously, which I do. I spent 75 quid on it when I last went. Tinned fish, very, very high quality anchovies, very high quality tuna, and they even have a museum to it there. It's also the most famous son of Setúbal is a certain Jose Mourinho. And Jose Mourinho, the main street's named after him, and the street parallel to that is named after his dad, who was the main goalkeeper of Setúbal for many years. And they're very proud of that fact. But basically, that whole region can be set in the sub-region of GI Setúbal. So if you make wine from all over that region, it's a GI regional wine, but it's not a DO. If you want a denominación origen, then you have to go origin, or how to pronounce it. It's only the top bit, really. You see that large green area, it's called Palmela. Palmela is where one particular grape variety, although there are many, many varieties planted, one particular grape variety is absolute king, and that's Castelao. Now, Castelao is a grape variety which I don't think many people in the wider wine context really know. It came from an estate which are the first modern winemakers were really Jose Maria de Fonseca in Azé town, and Castelao is a grape variety which used to be known as Periquita as well, the parakeet. But it is a grape variety which I think is, the more sophisticated the winemaking techniques are applied, the better it gets, and it's capable, I think, of real finesse. And it also shows with age phenomenal old vine character. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but I think some grape varieties benefit from being old vine and some don't. And Cashelau definitely does. I think it reflects a similar kind of depth and richness and umami in old vine wines that you get from Australian Shiraz. And I think that might be one of its selling points. So Dio Setúbal is just for Muscatel, for sweet wine. So if you see Dio Setúbal, it's usually Muscatel de Setúbal, but you can in fact blend the two types of Muscatel that they grow there, although in practice it's hardly ever done. Okay, so we've got specific areas, the mountain areas to the north with the mountains, Arabada, Luis and Francisco. They peak out about 1,800 feet, which is tall enough to protect the sort of like the heat trap of Palmella. It's sort of like it's like a little wonderful sort of oven, which has really big diurnal temperature variation, very hot days, very cool nights, which is ideal for extract and making wines with fine tannins. Are you all hearing this okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a kind of I suppose, a sense that the top bit's slightly posher than the bottom bit, which is, it's only fair considering the quality of the soils. But they are capable of making very nice wines in the south too. The flat area, again, Periquito or Cashelau is king here. What's interesting, and I think this is something that they could use to their benefit, is just south of the Tagus River, when you come over the Vasco da Gama Bridge into the main peninsula head, there's a research station, which I think is run by the university and also by the government, where in order to experiment back in the 70s and 80s about which grape varieties, both internationally and cosmopolitanly and locally and indigenously, would work very, very well in these slightly warmer climates. They have a research station where they passed a law allowing them, as you know, in European law, if it's not written down that you can plant a grape variety, you can't. So they wrote a list of, I believe it was 249 varieties, which they wanted to experiment with at the university. So it became enshrined in law that GI Setúbal can grow 249 different varieties, and literally every variety you can think of, from Albarino to Gruner Veltliner, is on that list. And it's kind of it's a bit of a loophole. It's a loophole in the law, because they had to do this for the research station to allow them to actually plant these varieties legally. You can indeed plant virtually anything you want in Setúbal, and I don't think that opportunity has been fully exploited, but it's quite interesting. But when you go to Palmella in the north, these are the key grape varieties in the region. For whites, the whites, because you're in a warm region, it stands to reason, like Rhone whites and Occitanie whites in France, that they're very large blends. Lots of little bits of things. So you've got Fenau, Pirish, you've got Anton Vache, you've got Rintu, you've got Muscatel de Setúbal, you've got all these different varieties, both internationally and indigenous. And Muscatel de Setúbal, because it's the key specialty of the region, is dominant, but not hardly dominant. I mean, it's less than 10%. But Fenau Pirish makes very nice Grenache Blanc style aromatic pear-like soft white wine. So that tends to be the variety that makes sort of like the wine that you drink your delicious clams bouillon pâteux with, or whatever. And there's also other varieties, like the varieties from Vineyard Verde, like Rintu and Albarino, which provide acidity to blends, which are very good. In reds, Cashelau is king. There's an awful lot of Cashelau grown there. But Syrah planted on its own in this region, I think, shows astonishing potential. Syrah has so many different faces, and Shiraz has so many different faces. What style is it like? Very black fruit, warmer, obviously less marginal than the lavender wines of Crow's Hermitage or the Northern Rhone, but not quite full throttle Bramble Australia either. They've got a nice, firm, stylish backbone to them, and I think the wines age very, very well. Quinta de Bacaloa makes a very, very good, relatively inexpensive Syrah, which would be a brilliant buy the glass red at winter. I think in the UK it retails for about £9. I don't know, well, not retail, but would sell to the on-trade for about £9. So Moscatel Rosso. Moscatel Rosso is interesting because there are two different Muscatels. You've got Muscatel de Setúbal, which is Ottonel or Alexandrian Muscat, large grapes. You can see them from the bunch there, big, shiny, honeysuckle coloured grapes. And then you've got Moscatel Rosso, which is very, very, there's a tiny amount. It's like 50 acres in the whole region, not even. And it's actually related to Muscat Petit Grain. So for whatever reason, Moscatel Rosso, there's a real prestige in owning any of these vineyards. And if you buy Moscatel Rosso, which is really very red, it's like Australian brown Muscat, it's the same variety. It's a Muscat Petit Grain mutation, which has red in the skins. It's seen as great prestige if you have any of that and you can make it, but it's a tiny amount, and it costs typically 2 or slightly more than 2 times the cost of an equivalent quality Moscatel Setúbal by the time it arrives on the shelf. And if I'm really brutally honest, I don't think that's the best use of it. And I think the Moscatel de Setúbals, especially with age and everything else, I think generally perform better anyway, even though we have this notion that Alexandra Muscat isn't quite as royal as Muscat Petit Grain or Brown Muscat. There are 1 or 2 people, and Raymond represents Felipe's wines at Quinta di Pelota, which we're going to taste a red of in a minute. He makes a dry white out of Moscatel de Rosso, so he makes a Blanc de Noir out of it, which is, if you go to the top restaurants all around Setúbal, if you go to 50 restaurants, you'll find on every list it's their favourite premium white from the region. It's utterly delicious. It goes very well with the food. Quite a stunner, actually. So there's also Alicante Boucher. Alicante Boucher, for those people who know or don't know, is a Teinturier variety. So it's got red flesh. When you squeeze it, it's like mulberry juice. You just can't get it off your hands. I think the use of Alicante Boucher, personally, is overrated. But I think if you have old vine Alicante, you know how to ferment it, and you use it judiciously, it can be a very delicious addition to a blend. But the old 100% Alicante from Tejo, that once you literally had a glass, you couldn't speak afterwards. The tannins, the greenness, I think those are slowly becoming a thing of the past. Okay, that's it. That's the presentation of Setúbal, guys. Is there anything you'd like to ask me?
No, thank you, Joe. That was brilliant.
You want to share your screen again?
Shall we go straight to the tasting?
Yeah. Well, can you unshare your screen so that we can just get us all back on, so we're more like 70 squares again. I mean, just picking up on what Joe said there, particularly, or perhaps anybody really, but I mean, Nick or Raymond, perhaps because of obviously your experience of Portugal. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you've only, well, not only, but you've got a producer that you're working with from Setúbal. Do you want to?
I have to say that the one that Raymond's got is he's an enigma, and he's a man about town. He's incredibly stylish. He comes from a near royal family. He's a most extraordinary man. He's one of the most entertaining men I've ever met in the trade. And he comes. There's money there. They're cash rich. And
can I get a sense of what? Is it fair to say that it's still to be really discovered, or is it just a fact that you've only got one producer from?
I think what's important to talk about is the split between private small producers like Quinta di Pelota and the rest. I already started off by saying that 1 in 5 bottles of red wine come from this region of Setúbal, this relatively small region. So there are 2 or 3 very large producers. What's interesting, Nick has spent many years seducing me with the wines of João Ramos over the years. I remember when we drank Villa Santa for the first time in Waitroses' tasting office, and thinking what extraordinary game changer it all was. And I think João Ramos' most famous kind of research assistant, most famous son, is a guy called Jaime Candera. Jaime Candera makes the wines at the largest co-op and the largest producer in the region, which is the Adega de Peguins. And he also makes the wines at Armelina Freitas, which is the largest producer, I think, of wine in the whole of Portugal, if you include all their other subsidiary wines. But he makes wines at both of those places, so is singularly responsible for somewhere in the region of 50 million bottles a year. So we're talking
Can I just try and bring other people in? I mean, say Nick or Raymond, I mean, is there a particular reason why you think it's an area that hasn't got as much distribution in the UK as before, or is it pick up on that?
I think from our point of view, it's been more the search for smaller individual vigneron growers, farms, and I think up to probably about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Setúbal was, as Joe says, dominated by the big guys, Irmelin, the Pegões Co-op, JM Fonseca, JP Vinhos, you know, they're all big concerns churning, you know, I would say more and more decent value wine, Castellão. Yeah, I remember it, in the early days, JP Vinhos had a dry muscat, or sort of off dry muscat, that Peter Bright made, which was, I think, in those days almost put it on the map as a place for wonderfully fragrant, fresh.
Yeah.
Did a lot for Portugal in many ways, but then there was a sort of lull. There was a sort of, things went back. Bacalhau came along, and they again, Peter Bright did his Mar Partilha with the Merlot. So little things coming up here and there. But now I think you've got places like Quinta do Piloto, which we represent, but others as well. There's Spira. There's there's another guy. Anyway, smaller producers who are exploring perhaps the more like Joe exposed. You know, you've got these other little zones further south, which in the early days didn't really attach themselves to the Peninsula too well. And I think there some spice and interest from the smaller growers' perspective.
And it does feel like a totally different country. I mean, you almost expect them to speak a different language. When you drive from Palmela down to the south of Santiago, you're going from kind of Beaujolais style, lush green hills, and then suddenly you're on this plain that looks exactly, if I was going to use a reference, as to Eden Valley in Australia. It's just, it's desert, gum trees and cattle, and it just feels like you've just been transported somewhere else.
Joe, to Raymond's point as well, like, you know, I was down in Setúbal early in the year, and actually at Festa, our wine festival that we put on in June, you know, we had, you know, another third generation small producer, Horácio Simões, you know, they're also experimenting. That's what I love. You know, Horácio Simões are really pushing boundaries. I mean, from really fine wines, they've got like their excellent, which is non-vintage, declared 3 times a decade, only when it's superb. But they're also, you know, I saw that they're at Amphora Wine Day just last weekend doing an Amphora Moscatel. Yes. And so, you know, there is experimentation going on there. Absolutely.
Raymond's got a chap, Felipe. There's nothing he won't try. I mean, he's got this range called the Cuvée Kamikaze, which are a range of wines which are perfectly illegal to make, I think, but they're actually made extremely well. He's got natural wines, he's got skin ferments, and it shows that there is the information, the knowledge, and the know-how in the region. Although I think if you look at the very bottom, you look at the more Luddite winemaking, and to the top, there's a big spread of skills. But at the very top, they're really cutting edge. There are people who are cutting edge in that region, but they do need a bit of ferreting out.
Can I throw in, Joe? I mean, when you mentioned right at the beginning about a fifth of all the production, etc., I imagine for a very long time there wasn't really a need to worry about export because all the wine was being drunk. It didn't really matter about the level of the quality because it was being drunk locally, and probably that maybe even held them back because they didn't really have that income.
I think that's a very astute point, though. Exactly. You know, I think that every country has its petrol pump wine that everyone drinks out of their little cup with their baguette and their little thing. I think in context, I think it's important that people see that. I always felt that there was the north of Portugal, and that was where the clever wines were, where the finer food was. But this is a really gastronomic area around here. We have the cheeses of Simões and the cheeses of Azure Town, which are some of the world's best cheeses. I mean, they annually win global cheese competitions, and they have the most amazing seafood. Their local snack is choco frito, which is deep fried cuttlefish with a salad and fries, and it's just divine food. I mean, I could eat it all day. Not good for my gout, sadly. But
should we? If we can't sadly have the food, but we can certainly taste some of the wine. So should we start going through some of these wines, and then we can think of something for lunch
Yeah, no,
Sardines
okay, pal.
Sardines on toast.
I will keep push this along quickly. I think we need to for time reasons. But so we're starting off with wines from Adega Fernampo, which is a quite a sizable producer. I would call it medium size for the region. And there are two winemaking dynasties, the Freitas and the Pelosa dynasties, who got together in the 1950s to build this winery. Anabel da Silva Freitas started it. And I think you're looking at 600,000 litres, 750,000 bottles, something like that. And we're starting off with some blends. What's important about Palmela is that Palmela is a region. If you want to sell your wine as Dio Palmela, it has to have 2/3 exactly or more Castelao. It doesn't matter what else goes in there, it's fine. But if it's got 65% Castelao, that's 1/3% not enough. It has to be 66%. So this wine could reasonably be sold as a Palmela, although I think the region, the vineyards where they're picked, also rules that out. But it's a Castelao Touriga Nacional Tanat blend. You look at 2019 was a lovely vintage, warm. That's, I think, one of the things I think that's really captured in my imagination about this region, why I got so passionate and enthusiastic about it, is that I think at a price, if you're looking at Premier Prix, entry level prices, I was astonished by how much character these wines had, and how very much like Setúbal, not even Alentejo, but had a real local identity to these wines, and how good Castelao could perform in a blend. And these wines have bottle age. You know, we've got that advantage that Rioja's had for decades, that, you know, when you get it, they've done the first couple of years aging for you in some of the cases. I'm not necessarily, that might just be down to business malpractice, but at the end of the day, you do get wines that are ready to drink, which I think are lovely. What do you think?
I believe the Tanat is in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
That's
I don't think there's very much Tanat, and I think it's just something they probably own.
I believe if, you know, it has a wonderful role, it does the characteristic of the region. It's not heroing the Castelao as it should be. I mean, Touriga Nacional is perfect. It's almost like the column vertebral of the wine. However, I believe the Tanat is just add that.
That's a bit of hardness.
Yeah, texture hardness that, you know, if, I don't know, the experiment with Aragonese possibly, just to add a little more sexy round perfume approach, because you want that glass of wine to drink it on its own and imagine yourself with a little bit of olives, a little bit of smoked almond, a little bit of mozzarella, a little bit some, you know.
This is the first time I've tried this wine myself, Emmanuel, and it's you can definitely see that lovely skein of blueberry from the Touriga Nacional. There's a little bit of spice.
Absolutely.
You've got that. I think how I described it, the old vine Shiraz being quite like Castelao. I think you can see that warm body of bramble fruit. I think the Tanat's there to give it some backbone. I think it's just a little disjointed, perhaps.
But to be honest with you, for €7, you're not going to expect a miracle.
Yeah, that would be.
That's the other point that will balance.
Emmanuel, that's less than €7 on the supermarket shelf.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's still
great
quality.
€4.
It is. Yeah. But if we're assessing a wine without knowing the price,
I mean, pounds. If you the price this wine, you think, shit, there's a lot of wine in there for.
Yes.
The price is stated on our tasting sheet, guys. Actually, it says €7.08.
Yeah,
X works.
Yeah.
X works. So that's not a cheap wine.
No, it's not. This is a wine that but that's quite a lot of that's quite a lot of money, knowing how much it costs in Portugal. I think that might be a mild bit of profiteering there. It shouldn't be that expensive. Because €7 is expensive. I mean, that's a 12.
Joe, when you look at it in the glass and you put your nose in it, you know, for me, I expected quite a lot there. I mean, I quite liked it. I like the kind of the weight in the glass. It looks almost kind of viscous, like a little plum and cherry, a little bit of kind of choc and strawberry. I was quite excited by that. It has a bit of character about it on the nose.
I'm glad you think so. I think there is definite character here. It does remind me of strawberry cheesecake. That was what I was thinking, actually.
I think you've got enough of the Castellan making its expression there. You know, those herby, stalky, brambly fruit characters. So yeah, I think it ticks the boxes.
I think so. I think I'd like a little bit more finesse, but
a little bit more length as well.
The second wine is more Touriga Nacional led, isn't it, I think.
Yes, this is just
that
this
could be
is more. So this I think is quite an important wine because Quinta de Camarate is one of the largest and most successful brands in Portugal, and it's made by Domingos, who is the custodian of the first great winery in the whole of Portugal, José Maria de Fonseca, and he's mostly the custodian of their incredible muscatels, which they make by far and away the large quantity of. The poor lad, he gave me a tasting of 40 of his wines, and some of the wines were astonishing, and some are getting more and more expensive. He's making some serious icon wines in the good sense. He hasn't been able to taste a single drop of booze for 3 years because he had a heart transplant. So I'm sitting there in front of him and he's drooling like a dog while I drink his wine, saying how nice they are. And he's not allowed to have a drink until Christmas Day. He's saving himself. First drink in 3 years. Can you imagine being a winemaker and not drinking wine for 1,000 days? That must be murder. Anyway, very, very, very nice man. Real character. Anyway, so they make all sorts of blends at José Maria Fonseca. I mean, it's a giant business. And now is where modern winemaking sort of started, red winemaking in the south of Portugal. Azetão is a destination, 25 minutes drive out of Lisbon, and it has all of the. It's like, I suppose it's like going to the Hamptons at the weekend. It's full of beautiful estates, wonderful old properties, amazing restaurants and food and bakeries and wineries, and it's kind of like a one-stop shop for foodies. And I strongly recommend people, if you ever go to Lisbon, to visit. But the two biggest wineries in the region, which are Bacalhau Estates and José Maria, sit opposite each other on the main roundabout in the middle of Azetão. The cheese Azetão is to die for. It's a soft, like a Vacherin type sheep's cheese. Azetão is azeitun. It's Arabic for olive grove. The whole region was just a massive olive production area for many, many years, and they realised that wine made more money. So there you
go. Nice and savoury bite to it, isn't it? In terms of
interesting wine. That's going to just come in because this is kind of in my territory.
Yeah, this
is £9 retail. I don't get to taste the very posh stuff very often because we're selling volume to national chains, and the conversation tends to stop at a certain price, which is frustrating because there's a lot of good stuff above that. But this is £9 retail, which must mean, I don't know, €2.50.
I think €2.50.
This is a smart wine considering it's 5 years old. It's got good balance.
Yeah, and
nice
very
acidity.
Hot, quite a tough vintage. In fact, I would have thought 17 was very hot and very arid.
Very ripe, overripe, over like a freshness a bit. That's right.
Yeah.
Wine is
I think
Falls away on the finish.
Can I ask,
it does.
in terms of trying to introduce new regions, or not new regions, but perhaps unknown regions or less known regions, are blended wines quite a nice way of doing that, where people may not necessarily recognise as a particular grape variety or recognise it, think of,
I think blends are going to be always going to be a bit more complicated to explain. What's frustrating is that's Portugal's superpower.
Yeah, that's absolutely the sweet spot, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's always going to be easier to talk about Bagger and exactly what Bagger stands for, or right. Touriga Nacional. When you're starting to talk about some winemakers that have 20 to 30 field blend grape varietals in their wines, it starts to get quite challenging. But I think talking more about Portugal as master blenders, field blenders, that's a superpower that we can really celebrate.
And Max, I think it's probably relevant to say, especially people like you and Raymond, who've got, shall we call it, skin in the game, and you've been in Portugal, you know what Portuguese people are like. I found the whole experience amazingly charming, stylish, polite, but there's a reticence to speak up or to change, to promote yourself. I think it sounds like anyone in Portugal is very happy to say showering praise about their best friend, but they won't say a single thing about themselves. They're very bad self-promoters. And I don't know if this is a hangover from the dark 70s when people weren't allowed to speak up, and it wasn't really that long ago. So culturally, I imagine that has an effect on people. You know, the Salazar era is not that long ago. But
Jose,
also,
Jose Mourinho just doesn't mind speaking about himself, does he?
yeah, you know, but he's the special one.
I think,
He's
look,
the-
naturally, Portugal, you know, the people are more conservative, and I think that probably does come from that history. You know, they don't have that same fiery Latin that you get in Spain, but that's actually quite lovely.
Yeah, I think that's why we like the Portuguese, isn't it? 'Cause they're quite British.
Absolutely, yeah.
Any other thoughts on this particular wine? No, what was your thought?
I'm just going to jump in on what you mentioned about the blend.
Yeah.
And I understand the idea of the superpower. I think that's great. I think that's brilliant if you have a one-on-one ability in a maybe a serious place with sommeliers, etc., who can explain things through. But I also think it's their Achilles heel. I mean, you know, when people, certainly in the UK, we look at a menu. If we don't understand what we're looking at, we buy the Shiraz. You know, we'll buy the Chardonnay.
That's very true.
And it's as simple as that. And I think that's the one thing where you have that wonderful diversity. And we mentioned at the beginning about the idea that they have almost a clean slate.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't know what they stand for.
And Noel, I think you're right. I think they should be making. I think they should. Well, Nick's proved that it's the case. But if you produce wines from comfortable, identifiable varieties, people are comfortable buying it. I mean, I think that you know, if they made more straight Shiraz, straight Syrah, maybe 100% Castelans, which some of these are anyway, I think they're just an easier sell. And I think you talk to any marketeer, they'll say the one thing you can never promote is diversity. How do you promote diversity?
Yes, can I come in though? Noel's right. Noel's right. The British public will buy the Malbec before they'll buy the Portuguese blend, you know, and there's two things that people look for, I think, when they're buying as a UK consumer. They look for the grape variety that they're familiar with, or they look for the appellation. You know, I'm pleased that we're talking about Setúbal as a region, as an appellation, because as a policy, Oakley Wine Agencies has tried to put the region, because there's not enough grapes that are well enough known, you know, and so we've 10, 15 years ago tried to champion Douro down. If you have a look at any wine in our range, the biggest word on the bottle, this is very amateur, but it's the supermarket customer. It has to have something familiar to jump out. You look at Tesco's Finest Douro, you look at Asda's Douro, it just says Douro. That's because that's what you're trying to sell. And it's the simplicity of the message. And
Nick, completely. That's why I called our restaurant Bar Douro.
Well, there you are.
I completely agree with you. It's like, you know, our wine list is region first. You know, when we talk to our customers and educate them, and we are still, Portugal is still very much in an education phase, even though it's starting to really grow and blossom. It's, you know, we talk about regions. It does get very complicated when you're starting to talk about.
Well, we're on a journey. When I started this journey, for most people, Portugal was the adventure. To even buy Portuguese wines at all from anywhere was completely off-piste. So at least now they're buying it and they're knowing the regions. And to some degree, and I'm really happy to say this, that people are prepared to try really anything from Portugal, blend or no blend, because they've suddenly got confidence in Portugal. You know, Aldi went big on Portugal. I mean, I think I'd be praising Aldi, but you know.
I think Max's restaurants actually generally got a long way to improving the currency of Portugal per se. I think that your restaurant's such a terrific place. I think it's showing people the diversity and the quality of the food in Portugal is, I think, the beginning to getting people to drink more of their wine, honestly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. That's really kind. I also think, obviously, tourism, you know, Portugal tourism has boomed in the last 5 years.
And how good is it? It's fantastic. I mean, I think the best place right now in the world.
Raymond, you want to come in before?
Yeah, what I'm just saying is that what we're all saying is that actually it comes down to the wines themselves. And the wines themselves that are being produced now and have been for the last, you know, getting better and better and better, are wines that people are enjoying.
Yeah,
they're actually, you know, whether it's pure Syrah or a blend of Syrah and Aragonês or Touriga, Castelão, they're just coming to them, and they've got expression. They're good, you know, they're across the price range. Like we've just mentioned, you know, there's tourism bringing this to people's lips and in context as well, and this is just generating that enthusiasm. So, you know, and the winemakers are responding to that, and you know, Joe on it. Yes, they've been going abroad. They've been learning. They've been going to wine shows, wine competitions. Learning all about that.
You know, you're Portuguese when you had your first over Bifana.
Their own expression, which this is the fun of it now.
But I honestly disagree from side of the region perspective, to be honest with you, because it could be very easily misleading people when buying wine. If you put Germany, if you put Riesling, if you put Mosel, if you put Rheinhessen, people have no idea if it's dry or sweet. People think Malbec is only Argentina. People think Sauvignon Blanc is only New Zealand. But I believe there is a little bit more than that in Portugal. And because of the diversity and an unknown indigenous grape to the land, it's very hard for consumer, especially supermarkets, to look at the bottle and think, oh God, I had the wine from Douro. But imagine he tried Touriga Franca, and then the wine he had before was Touriga Nacional. And then he will take the bottle, buy the bottle, and then he get home and he open that wine and say, oh my God, I'm not going to buy any more wines from the Douro region. I think
should we try the Castel?
Sorry to cut you off, Emmanuel. But I see your point completely, 100%. Just before, while we're tasting this wine, I just wanted to make a point about how I perceived the region when I was there. This is Jaime Candera. He was taught by João Ramos, the first real modern winemaker in Portugal in many, many ways that Nick's been championing for many years. And Jaime is a superstar, and he's an extremely engaging man. This co-op on its own makes 50 million bottles of wine a year. And it started off like Welwyn Garden City or Bourneville as a kind of a model village. Everyone got their own small holding. Everyone was allowed to own their own cattle. There was a stud farm for rearing horses on the place. And it was a really beautiful concept in the early 60s before things went rather Pete Tong in the 70s. And now it's just a co-op, a very big one. But what point I wanted to make about this is we compare this wine to the wine before. The wine before is almost falling over itself to be Portuguese and trying to be as a town, the dryness, the savoury. It's almost a hark back to a time when the wines were a little bit more austere, and in some ways it's slightly compromised by that. But then we go on to this wine, and I think the Ramos Candera philosophy is: look, we know what people are drinking, and it's a Apothic from California, and it's Shiraz from Hardy's. If you can't beat them, fellas, let's make wines that are fully expensive, fully ripe. It's a little bit of a cultural cul-de-sac. But if you want to get people to drink the wine, you have to give people wine that they feel familiar with. And I think these wines, very much like the wines that Nick used to sell at Tagus Creek, are wines that I think it's unfair to say mimic Australian and Californian wines, but are in the same ballpark, in the same category. So people find it very, very easy drinking. And this guy is a genius at getting relatively inexpensive fruit and managing the tannins very well. The wine you've got here is the most expensive red he makes. So look, I didn't want you to worry at €10, but this wine is made from 100% vines that are over 70 years old, and would sit on the shelf sort of like in the high, pushing 20 quid, I would say. But 70-year-old vines, top vintage, his very, very best fruit, and this is from 2016, which was a bombshell superstar year. And I think this wine, although it's very modern and very slightly less Portuguese than some, I think is an astonishing bottle of wine for the money. I think it's really very good, and it's very right. It's very, very southern Portuguese. It's very. If anything, I think it has the silk of premium Barossa wines. I think in some ways.
Yeah, gosh.
What do you think?
I like the kind of bright and crunchiness of it. It is. And
there's some fruit tannin, right?
It's really kind of fine, attractive tannins. It is a much prettier, quite fragrant.
Actually, I just bought it. It smells very slightly oxidized. I don't think the sample's very good.
Yeah.
I apologize. That was such a big up. Shame. It looks much better in the bottle, I'm afraid. This is the wine.
Pricing, because we've got €10 there. I think that's close to
I think Steve Daniels made quite a lot of money out of these wines. They claim this is their white wine from the estate, which is sold at the Wine Society. I drink this as my slush at home. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's made from God knows what. Arinto, Videlio, Chardonnay, Fernand Pirish, Anton Vache, and it's fermented for 3 months in American oak and then put in stainless steel. And this is home territory for Jaime Candera. That wine they're claiming at Hallgarten when we went to the sit tastings, they said was to the trade was £10.99. This is being sold at the Wine Society for £7.25. So I should take that price with a very, very serious pinch of salt. If you would buy any quantity at all, I'm sure that you could almost knock that in half.
Okay,
but I'm sorry that the wine's slightly oxidized. It's a shame.
Yeah, but it says some wines are imported from Hallgarten. I'm not sure. Is this specific wine from Hallgarten? I don't know.
Yeah, so but this is this is my tip for best value white of the year. So very nice.
I'm also a fan of that white wine, Joe. Actually,
it's so delicious.
I wish we were selling a wine that was similar to it. It's a benchmark, classically good white wine from Portugal.
The next wine, right, is actually we have somebody here who might be able to talk us through the next wine.
Yes.
Wine
Raymond,
number 4.
do you want to talk about Mr.
Talk about your old vines, or Castellar old vines from Quinta de Pelito.
Quinta do Piloto.
Piloto.
Yeah, so this is Dio Palmella.
Yeah.
And it's a favorite of Felipe.
The fabulous Felipe Cardoso.
Felipe Cardoso. Old vines. I'm not quite actually sure how old the vines are, but possibly
there are some very, very old ones. You know those rows by the Muscatel at the front of the Art Deco.
Yes.
There's about about 2 hectares of Castellar on that slope, and some of the vines are 120 years old.
Oh. He produced a 2017, which was nearly 15% alcohol, which he asked us to comment on, and so we said actually it's creeping a little too close.
It's a bit punchy. Yeah.
to a bit punchy. I think this one is drawn back a bit.
Yeah.
Made in a very traditional way, in auto fermenters, concrete, and then some time in a mixture of new and used barrels. So it's 100% Castellan. I think it expresses that.
It tastes very natural.
Yeah,
got a lovely vegetable kind of.
It has
chew on it. That's
very Mediterranean vegetables, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some wild characters in there.
It's almost like Cannonau from Sardinia or something. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think you can easily see the leveling up here when you get onto the hill, onto the powdery limestone clay soils. The tannin structure here is way ahead of what we've had so far.
I think there's a little bit of funkiness to it as well.
Yeah, there's a wee bit of breadth there. I can see that.
But I think that's Philippe's style. He's doing that.
He definitely waves his bum out the window of the train, doesn't he? He doesn't mind taking risks.
I think if you never tried that before, you think it's faulty. But if you know the wine, you know that's the style. That's the funky.
And that that was a nice plate of lamb. I mean,
yeah, it's not something we sell a lot of.
No. Actually, that tastes a lot funkier than when I tasted it when I was there. 2018. When I asked him, I said, "What was 2018 like?" He just looked at me straight in the eyes and said, "It's shit."
2018 was a sort of cooler year generally, all the way through.
Yes,
but off the back of a fairly decent winter.
Yeah,
with some good reserves of water. So acidities were better than 17. Perhaps not as much structure.
No.
But that's good for Castellan.
Very much. I very much like the shape of the wine. I think it's got very fine tannin, considering the tannins are ripe. I think the 19 he was at pains to show me, which isn't released yet, is a real cracker, actually. Very clean.
The only downside to this is the price.
Yeah, this is money. This is the most expensive. He is the most expensive producer in Setúbal.
This is the kind of, it feels like the Rolls Royce of Castellan or something. I mean, this is going to be on the list for over £200.
Yeah, that'd be money.
Very hard.
But that would be recommended retail price. Raymond, how much would you sell that to Emmanuel for? That'd be more like 22.
Yeah, that would probably be somewhere in the region of 15 to 17 trade,
which makes it slightly easier to swallow.
One for your caravan.
Yeah, like I say, we
That's,
don't sell a lot of it. It's
You do,
It's a very,
but
it's a very niche place for it. There's only
It is.
specific people who want it.
Emmanuel, seriously, as an Irvine, if you get a chance to taste the whole range with Raymond at some time, or if Felipe came over, I think he would love your restaurant. By the way, he's a real foodie. I think the range, when you look at the range, the creativity of this man and the confidence in his winemaking technique is second to none. He's astonishing. He reminds me of Eben Sardi in Spain. He has total conviction about what he does.
To be honest with you, the next wine is the hero, I believe. I have tried this wine for many, many, many years, and I think
this is wonderful.
Wine,
do you want to talk us through this one, then, Emmanuel? Do you want to? This is the Adega. Kamala. Yeah.
So this wine is a single block vineyard planted in 1931. And he makes a small amount of this every year, about 4 hectares, about 4,000 bottles. And this was the very first wine I tasted when I arrived in.
I don't know why no one imported this. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, the wine.
This wine, when I tasted it blind, I thought it was Graveyard Shiraz from Brokenwood. What is that? 300 quid? I think this wine is really this shows what old wines do. And this wine is 15% and a bit alcohol, and it wears it like a Paul Smith suit. I think it's a really lovely drink.
Oh yeah.
I hope you liked it as much as I did, but that was my favorite red on the trip.
Now I get transported to Setúbal.
There you go. Ready. Get the cheese out.
That's a proper one. This one I think is every year I taste this wine and I buy it for my own collection in Portugal. And it's always deliver. Always deliver.
I carried 3 bottles all the way back from Portugal.
Always deliver. Absolutely stunning. I think it expresses everything has to do with the grape variety in every aspect: freshness, earth, balance, tannin. And as Joe said, you don't even feel the alcohol. It's so well integrated into the wine. It's just exceptional.
This is the apotheosis of old vine Castelao for me. It's got all the character that Castelao has. Yeah. It's got the right phenolics. It's got the right flavor. It's got wonderful acidity. And the tannins just melt in the mouth.
And I think the magic touch of French oak here just changes the whole perspective of how the customer react.
And I think X works €11. Let's not muck around. That is expensive, and that's a fair that's actually fairly accurate. But
yeah, that's going to be 30 quid.
I'd very happily pay £30 for this. It wouldn't be a problem for me.
Yeah. Show sometimes perhaps the problem we have here, where you have 2 wines one after the other, which would be championed in different corners. One was more meaty and mushroomy and almost shellfish and maritime. I was struggling to find what fruit I'd take from it. And then you have this modern kind of, for me, a beautiful commercial style of wine. Now, neither's right nor wrong. It's just, it shows how difficult it is for somebody or a buyer or, somebody in what would be a supermarket or wine shop to say, oh, as Nick mentioned earlier, I love the idea of using the idea of the region. I think it's brilliant. People think of, Burgundy and the names on the bottle, etc. We could do the same, but the issue is just right there, when you take those 2 wines, as somebody mentioned, which is they are totally different animals of knowing what you're going to get. And some people will go in one corner and some people will go in the other corner.
No, this dude is a sweetheart, Miguel, and he this is his super premium wine. Yeah. But the rest of the range you could probably be bringing into the country under €2.50. Some of them are under 2.
Yeah.
What you need to see is what is everyday alcoholics red wine tastes like, and it's pretty solid. It's really solid.
That's their Ferrari. Even the rest of the range is outstanding. I mean,
the rest of the range is crazy. I mean, this is the same price as a whole case of their standard go-to red, which they sell at Pegodush. They sell it in the local supermarket for €4.20.
Wow. Wait.
Seeking distribution, as it says. Seeking distribution.
Yeah. I think he deserves to get some credit.
So yeah, well,
I'll race you, Raymond. I'll race you.
There's an open goal here for somebody.
I think it's
really end up without Raymond and Nick on this Zoom call, to be honest.
When somebody says the basic ranges can be had at €2 or €2.50, I mean that's music to my ears. Because we're just finishing the reds here at Setúbal, and we haven't really talked about how Setúbal sells in the UK. Maybe we will come to that a little bit later, but I don't have very much sales for Setúbal. I've got one red, which is uncharacteristic perhaps because it's a blend of Touriga, Syrah, and Aragonés. Yeah, it's from the bay of the Sado, Haddad de Gambia.
Lovely.
Very, very nice wine, and I think it is probably a typical example of one type of Setúbal red. It's not Castelao,
No.
Well, before
But I
we
do think, but Nick, I do think that the geographical circumstances are super strong. I mean, that dictates the wine much more than the variety, I think. On most cases.
Yes.
I also noticed that, I don't know if you guys, but some of the white wines, you know, the Boal de Barreiro, which is old vine, white wine, native variety Boal. It's fantastic. So it's not
talking about it.
So it's kind of like, you know, the reds and the whites are good, and they're native varieties and they're old vines. It's kind of for a restaurant like ours, it's like it's a lot of box ticked of interest. But you know, as Noel said, you know, we are very much at that end of the spectrum where people are already knowledgeable or semi-knowledgeable or have an interest in Portugal, and you know, and are trying to expand that knowledge rather than maybe picking up something really exemplary of Setúbal in the supermarket.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Richard, we've only got 7 minutes left of the session. Is everybody okay to hang around for a bit longer? Okay.
Let's go to the great Setúbal.
At the same time, would you rather I just talked about the wines and didn't show you this, because I've got a little slideshow about Muscatel. I think I might just take up time.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have to finish at 11:30 exactly, but we can keep on going a little bit. I'm just aware of people may need to go on further. If Emmanuel, you need to go on or whatever, but
I'm okay.
Yeah.
So my COO will tell me hola. Setúbal.
So I have to say, Muscatel de Setúbal is a pet love of mine. Muscatel, the vast majority of Muscatel de Setúbal is drunk with a cup of coffee in the morning, or over ice cream, or you know, made into all sorts of cocktails. They mix it with lemon to make a kind of a Muscatel sour, which is super delicious on the rocks. It's used when you go to Setúbal. If you go to the actual town of Setúbal, it's everywhere, and it's in everything. It's in all the ice cream. It's in the soap. It's everywhere. But something really wonderful about that. They clearly know they have something special, and it all started about 1831 when Jose Maria Fonseca first made it. And people ask me, well, where does it stand in the pantheon of fortified wines? I mean, how exactly is it made? Is it a sherry, or is it a port? Is it a Madeira? And the answer to that is yes. It's kind of a bit of everything. I'll just explain. There are many ways you can cut the cheese. There's quite a lot of, I wouldn't say slack in the definition of Muscatel, but things like how long you ferment the sugar before you add the rectifying liquid, the rectifying brandy, varies extremely. So let's say if you're making a bottle of Quinta do Noval port or Quinta La Rosa port, it's probably going to be fermenting for 24 hours. It's probably going to go up to about 1.8, 2.5% alcohol maximum before it gets killed with the alcohol. Here, it goes from there up to Muscat Baume de Venise levels, where they actually allow the wine to ferment to about 9%, to be almost halfway through its ferment before they stick it. So the level of sweetness, the level of vinosity, the purity of the Muscat character is dialable in many, many ways. So despite it being a small region with only about 20 producers, of which 90% of it's all from one guy, there are an extraordinary range of different styles, and we've got, I think, very well represented 3 styles here. The thing that I didn't know until I went out there, which I think is a real selling point for this product, because we all know how bloody difficult it is to sell dessert wine at the best of times. I think a little bit easier with fortified, is the wine has Cantera aging. They allow it to ullage for about 5 years before it's bottled. So it is fully Madeirized when you bottle it. So this wine, like a really good bottle from Mr. Blandy's cellar, you can open it, take a glass out of it, leave the stopper out for 3 months. It'll taste exactly the bloody same. It is completely bulletproof. So if you want a wine by the glass to go with Christmas pudding and mince pies at Christmas in a pub, this one, it never goes off. There's no wastage. 0 wastage. So in the on-trade, I think that's a great boon. And also when you look at the immense complexity you can achieve, it's a no-brainer for me. We've got one wine here. Should we just start? Should we just taste them straight away? So the first one is from Sociedad Vinicola Palmela. So this is actually made by Felipe Cardoso as well. He and a group of 4, it's like the world's smallest co-op. They've got 4 producers. And the guy from Quinta de Piloto makes this very well. I think this is probably my favorite 10-year-old. But this is a wine that's made in barrels. It's a single barrel. It's his 10-year-old, because in many different ways, is usually a Collietta. It's usually from one single vintage. It's not blended through other vintages, but they make it each year and then age it. And that's one way of doing it. This is Kinder Bacala 30-year-old, which is actually a single vintage 1985 Muscatel. That's 140 euros or something. But if you go to the original guys that are making it, this is the Alhambra, which is the premium wine from Jose de Maria. The Alhambra 20-year-old. The 20-year-old Jose de Maria Fonseca, they pick 4 vintages at the 4 different stages in the life of a Muscatel. So one of the vintages is 2001. One of them was 1994. One was a 1981. And the other one was a 1911 mixed together. Unlike port, if it says 20-year-old on the label, everything has to be older than that. So like whiskey, in fact. So when you buy a bottle of 20-year-old Alhambra Muscatel de Setúbal from Jose Maria from their wine shop, it might cost you 35 euros, but you're buying a wine that's probably got an average age of about 50 years old, which I think offers such mind-blowing value for money, especially when you see these wines. I think it's all for everyone to see. What do you think of this wine, guys? Nice 10-year-old Muscatel.
Yeah.
You can see, I think once you notice it, once you know that the wine has had some Cantero, some sort of like loft aging, you immediately start to notice it more. And I think this wine has this wonderful skein of Madeira stitched through it, although it's quite fresh despite that. It has that lovely smell. It reminds me of Blandy's Madeira Burgundy, which if you get to know Chris well enough, he'll give you a bottle of the world's most expensive vinegar, which he gets the Madeiras that don't work and makes it into a vinegar. It's got massive vat. It's probably a £400 a litre vinegar. But this wine has that bit of high tone, almost like a vintage Madeira on the nose. But then you very clearly see that wonderful barley sugar, sort of little tea-like, maybe black tea, which I think are typical of Alexandria and Muscat. But the wine has real complexity on the palate.
Lovely little nutty hazelnut and orange.
Yeah. A little bit of orange water. Oh, it's lovely, that. It's a beautiful wine. Again, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And this wine is not inconsiderable. Oh, look, X works 11.59. So it's not. I think you're looking at 30 quid for a bottle, maybe 25, something like that. But it's £25. I mean, that's the price of a second-rate single Quinta port now. So it's still value until the Americans get a hold of this, and we never get to see it ever again. I think we should be buying some. Now, the second wine in this lineup, I think it's very special. Joan at Venancio de Costa Lima is a 1 million bottle producer. Most of their wine is table wine, red wine and white wine, but they make the most phenomenal Muscatel de Setúbal. It's in small quantities. Gauntleys of Nottingham have just taken these guys on. Their 5-year-old is gorgeous. It tastes like a slightly aged Baume de Venise. It's got wonderful perfume. But this one, you can really see the maderization. You can see that they ferment the wine for longer. There's more velocity. There's a competition every year for the world's best fortified Muscat. And she's won it 3 times out of the last 5 years with this cuvee, this one bottle, 2009. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, because I think it's a very different take on the first one.
I think the fruit is lovely on this. Got all those sort of citrus peels, and then you see there's almost some red fruit in it as well. It's weird.
Yeah,
but good balance, length, that nice little bit of chalkiness that I like to see in a top level Muscatel.
I think as well
chalkiness.
Yeah, I think as well,
you're right.
Overwhelmingly sweet. It's not overwhelmingly sweet, and that's what you want. You have more complexity, texture, fruit profile than what people perception is immediately Muscat, sweet, heavy, sweet. Have elegance.
When you put your nose in and taste it with that kind of richness of marmalade, you think it will be overly cloying, and it's absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think that very cleverly there's some tannin stitched into that, like a red port. I know. I think that wine's extraordinary. The more you taste it, the more fun it gets.
Very good.
These are nice creme catalana or something like that, creme brulee.
Yeah, that citrus peel texture
It's lovely.
really comes through, doesn't it?
You can feel the oils, almost the citrus
Same
oils.
same retrofaction. What you smell is what you taste. This is absolutely stunning.
It's got
Sorry,
great acidity.
gentlemen. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Thank you for an amazing breakfast. I really have to shoot for.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Emmanuel. Thank you for your
Emmanuel, pleasure.
I
to
must
meet you.
shoot
Take
off
care.
for another meeting with the COO. I can't miss that.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Sam Emmanuel. It's really pleased to have you.
Absolute pleasure, and I hope to
Tom.
see some of you or all of you here whenever you come to the Savoy Hotel. We're
Please.
always the one above for a glass of wine in the bar anytime.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for presentation. Lovely to meet all of you.
Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you
Ciao,
very
ciao.
much. Bye bye.
Can I ask, just in general, in terms of Muscatel and as a style? I mean, how well does that fare in terms of sales and interest and people recognizing what it is and expect what they're actually going to expect when they order it?
Yeah, what people's feelings about that? I mean, I feel that Muscatel is more accessible than others fortified because you've got a variety to hang the hat on. It's got an identity to it. I think some of us drink Australian muscats, maybe French Riesling.
Really feel though is something which is very different from a kind of classic fortified. Isn't it? It's got a real...
It's more like a Muscat Riesling, almost like a white Banyol or something. You know.
Well, I think Portugal's got so many wonderful fortifieds that you've got Carcavelos like Vila Oeiras, which is has even more piercing acidity. It's beautiful. But I think it's always going to be hard against ports that's just had so much history and so much. There's so much connection between the UK and Portugal for ports. That's always going to be front of people's minds.
It's always going to be front page news. Yeah, you're right. But I think there's so little of this.
Yeah,
you only want to get one territory involved in this, and you're using up their production. And so I'd rather it was England than anywhere else.
Completely. And Richard, back to your comment. From my point of view, at the restaurant, we've currently got a Moscatel by the glass, Moscatel de Setúbal by the glass, and it sells really, really well. But I've got the luxury of putting something in front of people and they take it. It's not on a supermarket shelf or it's not in a.
I think if you get a chance to taste it and experience, particularly the
and Max, you've got your Churchill's White Tawny on the. That's a hard. That's
yeah. That one, I think I'd be disowned if I took that off.
I was the first person to buy that for Waitrose with David Gill back in the day. We were the first person to got that in the UK, and I was obsessed with it. I drank it. It was an amazing drink.
Can I just come in on the Setúbal conversation?
Yeah. Sorry, Nick.
So as a company, we don't sell any fortified wines at all because we find it very hard to represent them in the same way that you do wine production because they're heavily branded, and if you're not kind of long connected to the producer and there's very few names, it's like trying to sell whiskey. So it's a completely different game to selling wine in my experience. And Muscatel is the least well-known of the, let's say, the world famous fortified wines. Port and sherry are well ahead. However, I would say that you can sell Muscatel in the way that you sell wine. In other words, it belongs into the wine category in the way that Port and Madeira doesn't. So there is kind of a backdoor into the market, I think, and I think Max's ability to sell it well in Bar Douro, speaks for that. So it's something that we don't represent. Maybe we should, but yeah, I can see an easier route to market for it than for an agent like myself than Port or Madeira.
I agree with Nick. I agree with Nick. I think that it does cross the borders. It brings the two together, really, from the camp of the fully fortified to the non.
It feels like
it's incredibly versatile in cheeses, sweets, whatever you know.
I mean, winter goodness, Stollen, Lebkuchen. I mean,
I just think it's got. Although we're already thinking about my festive celebrations in terms of what these wines
it's
can
got
go.
it's got Fortnum and Mason written all over it, hasn't it? Muscatel de Setúbal.
But it's funny because you know we sell quite a lot of fortified wine, and it's now that we sell most of it.
Of course, yeah.
Muscatel, it's a tiny proportion of that, but it sells constantly all the way through the year.
Okay.
So there's constant demand. It doesn't sort of go up, down, or anything. It's just there.
Which picks up
and
on
it's growing.
It's seen as slightly different from the port.
Can I,
On that note, can we just taste the last one so we've got them all?
Noel, do you want to just quickly dive in before we do that?
It's just picking up on what a couple of people said there. Nick mentioned selling it as a wine. To me, I don't see it in the port category. I see it more in the kind of sweet bar Sauternes kind of category as an alternative. And I do think it's something where we have. I think it's still a hard sell against the known brands, as it were, Sauternes, etc., in terms of big supermarkets, but certainly for some like independent retail, I think that's a brilliant kind of option for people.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
So this is our last.
Yeah. So this is Casa Emelinda Freitas, which is probably the largest production company, not specifically in Setúbal, but they also have vineyards in other parts of Portugal. Largest winemaking company in Portugal right now. And this wine is the same price Cellar d'Or. I saw it on the Cellar d'Or. I think it was 41 euros on the shelf. That, by the way, is for a half bottle. So this wine's actually more like 60, 70 quid. And this is a unique, possibly for all of us, opportunity to taste Muscatel Rosso made like a Madeira, made like a port. There is a tantalizing tannin to this wine that makes it very special with food. I think this is a really interesting wine with food. If you know, dessert matches, and not even, but things like blue cheese and stuff, it's really spectacular. But at the same time, I don't see how this is offering better value for money than the wines before it, and it's nearly 4 times the price. But this is Muscat Petit Grain red. There's 20 something hectares left in the world, so it's kind of like it's the wine equivalent of the panda. Everyone's desperate to try and save it, but it's not meeting you way. You know, it's not. You know, you put 2 pandas in a cage and they don't do anything about it. You know, you've done the best you can. You can lead a horse to water, and I think Muscatel Rosso is a bit like that. They're going, try our Rosso. It's very, very special. But I'm going, no, I want to try the Muscatel de Setúbal. It's much more interesting.
This is not boasting the fact that it's Muscatel Rosso on the technical sheet, though.
No, but when you see the bottle, it sits almost. If you go into Emelinda Freitas' Cellar d'Or, you've got all the wines, and there's this like plinth with a bottle of it sitting there in this kind of glass, saying, that's kind of very messianic.
It's less interesting than the previous wine, I think.
Personally.
I know that I can't remember the sommelier's name now. Was it Emmanuel?
Emmanuel Query, yeah.
Emmanuel has left, but he commented on the fact that slightly drier fortified sweet wines have a certain poise to them, and I like that second of the 3. Yeah, for its slight dryness. You know, I like Taylor's Port more than I like Graham's because it's 95, not 130.
Yeah, I'm a big Dow fan. I think Dow is the driest of the Symington ports. I love Dow. And for that reason, exact reason, Nick, I think when you get the tannin first and the sweetness second, you get this wonderful tension in the drink, which the last one just tastes one-dimensional and sugary, doesn't it? After that second one, because the second one had all those layers. But I think the point was made, the first 2 certainly, that as a fortified wine region, there's plenty of choice if you want to become a bit of a hobbyist about it, to try different ones. But even just to pick one of these, you would. I mean, we're showing up. We're putting best foot forward here, but you can. They're selling the 5-year-old Jose Maria and Waitrose at the moment for £7.95 a half bottle on the shelf. I mean, what do you want? Blood? I mean, £8 for a wine of that caliber. Yeah, I think it's just outstanding value for money.
Yes. By the way, can I just cut in here? I'm not wanting to go. I'm very, very much in the meeting. But are we just going to conclude about sort of the commercial side of Setúbal?
Yes, please.
I think there's 2 or 3 things that I've been wanting to say, and you've just mentioned something which reminded me.
Yeah, I mean, aware of our time.
My end of the bargain was I was asked to do the presentation, do the tasting, and please feel free to talk about this. This is why we're here. So Nick,
exactly.
Fire away.
No, I'm going to say, I mean, I'm aware I mean, I did say 11:30 because I know people
No problem for me.
commitments, but I mean, perhaps if we say the next we've got sort of 5-10 minutes, then we'll wrap up. But yeah.
Yeah.
So Nick,
I mean, what it struck me was that at the moment, we're facing an increase in the tax on alcohol coming up next spring. I saw the government report, and nothing's going to be changed. It's going to be coming in from February next year, as I understand it.
Terrifying.
And it's terrifying for port producers and muscatel producers because the tax is going to be substantially increased. I mean, there's another £1.50 on a bottle of port.
Yeah, it's going to cost £6 tax on a bottle of vintage port.
It's a lot of money, and also just going back to the table wines, we're tasting a Castelao there, which is 15.15 Ital, as you say in Portugal, and that's also going to have another 60, 70, 80 pence worth of tax extra on top of a 12.5% wine. So I think for Setúbal, it's actually quite a worrying development, because I think it's kind of an area that is ready to kind of find its feet. I know it's late to the party, perhaps, but
I think it's a worry. I was actually out at the World Bulk Wine Fair this week, and you had Argentine producers who were head in the hands about their frosts and Saudi Arabia, plus the UK duty rates. But I mean, I think it's something which, but just in terms of the region as a whole, based on what we've talked about before and your experiences beforehand, I mean, if you're looking forward, perhaps, well, two things really. One in terms of where you see the potential as UK buyers, but also a message to producers in the region about what they might need to be doing to get people like you more interested.
If I just start with the sort of the bigger volume end of the market. I think Setúbal is relatively late to the party. We're seeing a lot of areas starting to be very successful. Lisboa with the Porta 6 and Alentejo and Tejo have been around for quite a long time. And all the northern appellations have reached a level of success. Setúbal is still quietly not doing terribly well, I think, in terms of presence in the market, but it did kind of lose its way a little bit. I like this Castelao style. I also like those sort of blended reds from near to the water, and I think there's a market for white wines. I know at Max, I can't remember the producer, but at Festa there was a terrific it's called
Clásico.
Well, he was making white wines which were like 11.5%, which I thought were very interesting. And I think there is, I know this is sort of slightly off piece because we're talking about Setúbal, but the Palette style wines, which are 11.5%, I think they could really, really find their feet with this new tax regime. But that's perhaps going away from Setúbal slightly. But
sorry,
that's my input.
You're talking about Herdad de Setúbal.
I am.
I
am.
Fantastic, yes. Fantastic wine.
Those natural wines are beautiful. I wanted to include one of them in this tasting actually, but his wines are beautiful.
But but that's the other side of the spectrum, I think, Nick, from the volume, the commercial. You've then got people like Herdad de Setúbal, and you've got Horácio Simões, and they and Ray sorry, what was it? It was exactly. Quinto do Piloto. Those guys are the ones that are, I think, going to drive the awareness in the wine bars. Those are the guys that are doing something that's a bit more edgy and that's maybe going to create a little bit more of demand.
I think they're far more tuned into how to market and how to get things to market. They're very, very switched on, very self-aware in a way that quite a lot of Portuguese producers aren't.
Yeah, Raymond, what's your thoughts in terms of how you're going to have for a region for it to sort of move to the next level?
I think I'm a great believer in the Castelao. I think the Castelao, although this year apparently it was severely hammered because the heat waves came at the wrong time for that particular grape. So and Muscatel itself, and these are the words of Philippe, who I spoke to a couple of days ago, just to get a view on that. I think Castelao suits the zone, but there are others. He's trying an Alfrocheiro, which
Yeah.
was tremendously expressive and zingy and loads
delicious.
of
Absolutely.
character. So Gerstelau, I think, and those blends, and maybe we go for the lighter style, as Nick says, you know, more Paliet, but I think the smaller growers are exploring all these little things. What I would say is we mustn't forget Muscatel, and thanks, Joe, for bringing 3 high quality examples of that to this tasting. And for me, it's the only way to go for Muscatel is high quality. We're talking a tiny amount, really, you know, maybe 8%, 7% of the total area.
Yeah.
It can only be a quality game.
Premium products, yeah.
And I'm not saying, you know, price necessarily. I'm just saying quality. So make the best you can, even at your non-vintage end.
I agree. I think the difficulty, Raymond, is you need a well-funded table producer in order to have to afford the patience and the time it takes to get these wines to get to where they should be, because in terms of cash flow, they're terrible. It's no surprise that Jose Maria and Bacalao are making probably collectively 95% of what there is, because they're the 2 biggest producers.
Yeah. But then there's, you know, as Max pointed out, there's versatility in whites as well, and it is an ocean zone. It's right next to the sea. We should be able to produce more.
And they're wonderful, and that's why anyone, you go to beach restaurants and you eat your turbot, line caught straight out of the sea, and big Cabanieri shrimp, and all you want a really fresh briny whites, and that's all there. They're just not selling it hard enough. I mean, there are some delicious white wines there that fit the bill exactly.
And you know, what's wrong with a bit of Muscatel in the blend as well?
Absolutely not. I give the Pelote Muscatel Blanc de Noir, where he calls it. It's just such a deliciously poised, crisp white wine. It's a fabulous wine.
Well, I think it's clearly very encouraging that obviously the region is look to put on today's event as well. So credit for them for helping to make today happen. And that, I suppose, by having these kind of conversations and talking about it in this way is part of that awareness campaign. Really, I mean, Noel, from your point of view, I mean, what would be your takeaways or advice in terms of where you see the potential or the opportunities there might be?
Well, for me, I just wrote down a few bits and pieces here. There's still a confusion of style here, you know, in terms of what it is we'll be buying, selling, offering, what the consumer is expecting. And that expectation drives everything, because they eventually fell in love with Sauvignon from New Zealand or Malbec from Argentina. And that consistency is what brought them there, and knowing pretty much what they are going to expect.
I think there's missing a trick. They should remarket themselves as Castelao.
I've written down here, Castelao, etc.
And I was trying to explain to the Portuguese producers why. I said, well, it even sounds like castle, even sounds like.
It sounds important, and
sounds like
we can say it.
we can
say it. And that's really, really.
If you had a picture of a castle and you just call the wine Castelao, it would.
I know, well.
They may not have your fabulous accent, Joe, but most people up here would still be able to say it.
I know. I think I've failed about 6 times today already, but
it's so important. I've written down here: needle in a haystack, exceptional producer, modern style. They are there. They're just not obvious to people, and maybe it takes more people to go and have a little look, or maybe they need to promote themselves better. I don't know. But clearly, from tasting one of those wines, there's brilliant things. There is everywhere. You're always told there isn't, but you can already find.
I think a generic tasting is great.
Offline, Noel, there's a couple of other producers which I think you might want to look at more seriously in terms of your price expectations. But we didn't cover them all here, obviously. And you've got a region which is, on one side, is ultra diverse, and which is hard to promote. Grow anything anywhere you like. And then you've got a DO in the middle of it that says you can only do one thing, and it's a very, very mixed message.
Yeah, I found it, interesting. I found the whole piece. Okay, there's still for me a little bit of old hatness there in some of the stylings. How do you bring that to the fore? But I think we mentioned. I think it was Raymond mentioned Castelao also. I mean, that's the way forward. They need to hang their hat on something and do it really, really well, with the help of maybe a few people going there and taking some exceptional pieces over. The Indian creativity is obvious. The on-trade, high-end on-trade for someone like Max is obvious. The more difficult, I think, is really for Nick and Raymond, where, you know, where do they get that, you know, consistency and value of getting that in front of the modern, the standard person who's gone in, just going in for a bottle of wine, and you'd stop them leaving with the Shiraz. How do you do that? And that's extremely difficult still, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we should put.
Can I just say, Max, could you have a final thought yourself?
Well, I was just thinking, just one thing is some of the Moscatel producers that I've come across, and Raymond, like, I'd love to know about Quinta de Piloto is, you know, the sort of allocation sizes, what are the volumes? Because, you know, then like Raymond, I think the most important thing is to focus on quality. Portugal, Setúbal's it's a small area. There's going to be finite production. There are a lot of markets around the world. You know, do they really need to flog this at the lowest price, or should they be actually premiumizing and focusing on making something?
I think Max, locally, that there is a culture. They think that they're already quite expensive. Locally, how they feel, and I think that by bringing international eyes onto the subject, I think they'll start to understand that the picture's much bigger than they really think it is.
Yeah,
and I think that if they were, I mean, Nick said it himself, you know, if they're not offering us wines under €2.5, we know that we can't convince the supermarket buyer to even look at it. So it's already at a price point which is difficult for the off trade. But actually, the sweet spot is definitely somewhere between there and €11. If you find there are wines at €6-7, which are stunning and would make great on trade offers. I mean,
completely. And as you mentioned, when the Americans catch wind of it, they'll be all over it. And you know what I hear from so many of our producers in Portugal that we work with is England is a struggle. America, they sell out their allocations, and so you know it's kind of like this market. Also be, and
if you ask the growers and you ask people, you know, Anna, Severa, and Katia, what they're hearing over and over again is, we know customers like the wines. We know that small restaurants like the wine. The problem is with a lot of the larger, big corporate distributors, present company accepted, by the way. So now, because both Nick and Raymond have really sort of lit the candle for Portuguese wine for decades, but everyone else, I mean, you look at Liberty and look at the size of one, they could make a fantastic value for money by the glass wine, but they're probably being motivated by, I don't know, Gandia to not do it, or you know, there's a million reasons why they would worry that one of their prize large importers from Spain or Italy might be offset by the sales of Portugal, so they have to play it politically. And I think it's very difficult to get the big other importers in this country to take Setúbal specifically quite seriously. And I think they are missing a trick. These wines have real identity at an inexpensive price. They have character. They're age worthy. Castelao doesn't need to be blended with anything, so I don't know why they bother. They should just make Castelao. I know. I think the future's quite positive. And the other thing is that we're not seeing increases in sales necessarily with our own eyes, and we're experts in the field. But sales from 2021 to 2022 went up by 200%. Really? So it's 200% of a small pot. But
yeah,
I think we'll
encouraging.
I think we'll wait to finish actually, Joe. I think you really sort of summed up opportunities and potential as well. I think what I'll do is we'll call it a day here, and we can talk a lot more in general. And as I say, I think it's great the fact that we've had the opportunity to introduce these wines, and we'll have the conversation in the first place. And hopefully it will be the first of many, and perhaps a generic tasting next year might be a good
awesome
for this.
If you guys are interested, maybe I would like to pitch to Katia and Anna to do a buyer's trip next year. Maybe just spend 2 days wandering around, having a look, and seeing if you feel the immersion the way I did. There's stuff to be had, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'll call it a day there. Thanks a lot for everyone for taking part, and we'll close the recording here now. But thanks for everybody, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Cheers, fella.
Cheers, Richard.
Thanks,
Cheers, Joe.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.